Just want to let you guys know that this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to visit prizepicks.com or use their app. Use the promo code when you sign up, BTJ, for a $100 deposit match. So the Indianapolis Colts added to their pass rush department in round one, in day one, 15th overall. The Indianapolis Colts added edge rusher Latu out of UCLA. In today's video, guys, I want to talk about and look at how Chris Ballard changed his approach when it came to the edge rush position. So let's get into it. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, here together, guys, for the first night of the NFL draft. Has come and gone now. We watched all of it. We got all of our thoughts kind of in order. And Derek, something immediately when the Indianapolis Colts took Latu at pick number 15. Obviously, there was a lot of different emotions, ranging from being super excited, being super confused, to super upset. But today I wanted to talk about this idea of Chris Ballard and kind of what he did when it came to this edge position. Now, obviously, Derek, we've seen Chris Ballard in the past, in past drafts, attack this position in different ways. We've seen a lot of resources allocated to trying to fix specifically the edge position to really minimal results for your return, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen the Colts invest in different players, like from all the way from Kemoko Turay and Tyquan Lewis back in 2018. We've obviously seen the Colts with Ben Banogu in 2019, and then even as late as 2021, trying to address it and double dip in the draft by taking Kwity Paye with the first round pick they had, and then Dayo Odeyingbo in round number 2. Now, obviously, there's been some decent results in terms of just pure numbers of getting after the quarterback. Dayo and Kwity both had 8 sacks in 2023, but there just hasn't been that consistent pressure, right? And Derek, one thing that we've noticed with all these picks for the Indianapolis Colts, specifically at the edge position, Chris Ballard has been a very much a traits type of guy when it comes to getting after some of these guys, right? When it comes to guys that he is drafting to get after the quarterback, it's been a lot of traits a lot, and not necessarily production to match, right? Yeah. I mean, you think of a guy like Kemoko Turay, not a big sack guy at Rutgers when the Colts took him, right? And obviously he had some moments, but it didn't translate to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And obviously different guys like Ben Banogu, even Kwity Paye wasn't a big sack guy at Michigan, right? Now Kwity Paye is a really good run defender, right? But he just lacks something when it comes to getting after the quarterback on a consistent basis, right? And so that is just something that I think is so interesting that we've seen Chris Ballard, specifically in this draft. He changed his philosophy. He modified the way that he attacked the edge position, which I think personally is a very positive step in the development of Chris Ballard as a GM, as a talent evaluator, and things like that. And I think it's so interesting because obviously, number one, this is the highest we've seen the Colts address pass rush at all in the Chris Ballard era, right? Pick number 15, that is nothing to scoff at. That is major draft capital invested into that position. But something interesting with Latu, which I just found that was different, and maybe this would be different than what Chris Ballard would have done 2, 3, 4 years ago, is the fact that Latu is a player that while he still has some good measurables, like they're not bad measurables by any means, he still has the athleticism, over a 9.3 RAS score, but there are some certain measurables that when you look at Chris Ballard in the past and some of the traits, might he have, not gone after a guy like Latu in the past, right? Yep. Because it's been so much a traits-oriented thing. But now it feels like Chris Ballard and the Colts are starting to finally marry those two together with the selection of Latu, right? Because when you look at Latu, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. I mean, 13 sacks a season ago. He is one of the best edge guys in the NCAA last year when it came, really the last 2 years, when it's come to getting pressure after the quarterback. Not just that, he also is really good in getting tackles for loss. He's a really all-around great player, right? He's got good size. He's 6'5", 265, and everything like that. But he's also just got that production. And I think that's just such an interesting thing in kind of the evolution of Chris Ballard, because this hasn't typically been a Chris Ballard type of pick, right?
Yes.
With Latu. And so I just find it so interesting that now the Colts are actually going after guys that have shown that they can get some solid production as well, which is just something completely new for how the Colts have typically drafted edge under Chris Ballard.
Yeah, it's definitely a different approach. It's no doubt that Indy under Ballard has tried to do has bring in athletes that would eventually hope that they can progress them and develop them into what they hope for them to become. And I think for a lot of different positions, having an athlete at a skill position works for you, because if you can have an athlete at a skill position, it's a lot easier to develop skills rather than to develop speed and athleticism that they didn't have before. Because that's a God-given talent. There's just some guys that just have it. But when it comes to the edge, I don't think the athleticism is quite what translates to the NFL as much anymore. I mean, just look at like some of the best edge guys in the NFL today, right? Who are some of the best defensive linemen in the league that were freakish athletes? And I mean freakish athletes. Myles Garrett might be the only one. Aaron Donald had a good combination of power and athletic ability, but he also was smart in how he approached things. And I think that is what makes a defensive lineman so great, is you not only have athletic ability, but you also are smart in how you approach the game and how you're able to use those fundamentals. Joey Bosa was so widely criticized when he came into the league and was drafted by the Chargers 3rd overall. A lot of people are saying, this guy's 40 is trash. He's not going to be good enough to get around anybody. He's going to have to fight through everyone. And he's also undersized, so he's not going to be able to win all these battles. Sure enough, ever since Joey Bosa's been in the league, he's been one of the best defensive linemen in all of the NFL. Nick Bosa, the exact same way. TJ Watt, he's no athletic freak. He's probably the best pass rush guy in the entire league. So you look at some of the best edge rushers out there, they're not freakish athletes. They have athleticism, but they're not freakish athletes. They work on the fundamentals, and they're smart about how they approach the game. Even Max Crosby, you can think of the exact same way. Max Crosby raves about Latu and how he approaches the game and how he understands how to beat somebody on the edge. So you're right. What Indy has done is they've tried to make the same approach with the edge that they've done with every other position. Even if that said player didn't have a ton of production in college, you took him under the assumption that with those athletic traits, with enough teaching, that guy was going to be able to understand it better once he got into the league. Well, here's the thing. For defensive linemen, I think more than anything, defensive linemen, if you don't learn it in college, you will not learn it in the NFL. It's so much because you're so much further behind in the NFL if you don't have a head start on how to use your hands, where to hit somebody, how to attack angles, how to gain control of wrists. Like, that's why guys that come out of Ohio State have done so well with Larry Johnson, because he's done such a great job of being able to teach these defensive linemen how these fundamentals work. And that translates well to the game, because when you get into the NFL and you already know these things, you hit the ground running and you don't have to learn a new technique and instincts that take years to develop. And that's probably what we're seeing with Kwity Paye right now and Dio Adangbo. We saw last year, they both had 8 sacks. Great. That's something that we wanted to see them try to progress. But at the same time, we also sit here and we believe that might end up being their ceiling. We don't really think that Kwity Paye is going to end up being a really, really good defensive lineman. He's more of an edge setter in the run protection. He just never quite had all the fundamentals needed to be a consistent edge guy, at least not right now. So what you're seeing now is in Latu, who may have shorter arms. He may not have quite the size of hands. He may not run the fastest of 40 times. He may not be as built physically as a Kwity Paye or as a Dio Adengbo. But what you have in this is Latu comes in with this knowing in those 2 years of college football that he played, he was so dominant, and the stats speak for themselves. So this guy was able to dominate and not just do well at a college level, dominate at a college level. And because he understands the game, he's smart, he knows how to attack things. And if you guys get a chance to listen to when he was on Max Crosby's podcast, I was listening to when he was talking about some of these, how he attacks guys, and he knows how to pinpoint what guys' tendencies are, which allows him to do so well against every opponent that he faces. So just looking at it from the consistency standpoint and saying that you know how to attack someone rather than just relying on those physical traits to get you there. Everyone in the NFL is physically gifted. That's why they're there. Right. You can't just depend on that. You have to be able to, I would much rather a guy know how to use his hands and be one of the slowest dudes out there than be the fastest athlete out there, but not have a single clue of how to use a actual pass rush move. Yeah. Because the guy that knows how to use his hands will win more reps than the guy that just bull rushes. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football and tennis and baseball and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Yeah, I think specifically like those couple positions, edge being one, obviously. I think like edge and quarterback, like they don't always have to be, like you said, there needs to be some sort of athletic ability, of course, but you don't have to be the greatest athlete. Like you don't have to be this 10 out of 10 RAS score every single time. You know what I mean? Like obviously you need to have some of those traits, but like the up here, right? That matters so much to what you do. And, that's why we've seen different guys. And that's why even a guy like Chop Robinson, right? A guy that I think Chris Ballard would have been all over a couple years ago, because the traits are there. No question about that. Yeah. But the production's not there.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest thing for me is I think that production translates. I do think that translates. If you're not just doing well, but dominating, like you said, I just think that translates because he has that level of competition that he's played against. And it's not going to be that big of a jump as some of the other guys, especially guys like we've said, who never have done that in college, right? Yep. It's like Latu knows what it means to dominate. He knows how to get into that zone. And so I think that gives him an edge over some of, maybe other guys who haven't produced at a high level in college, So I think that's been a great thing, is not just purely falling in love with the traits, especially at those premium positions. I think that's been a big fault of Chris Ballard, and that's why some of these guys haven't worked out necessarily to their full potential. That's why you wasted multiple really important picks.
Yep.
And that's why it hasn't, worked out, is because you've gone purely on traits, not on things that maybe an RAS score doesn't pick up. Like you mentioned, up here, some of those mental things, and also just other things that matter as well, obviously production being one of those things, but just some of those things where it's like either you have it or you don't sometimes. Yeah. And definitely Latu is a guy that has it, no question about it. And again, Derek, we've talked about it, how important it's been for the Colts to actually get that number one guy at pass rush.
Yeah.
I think it's going to change so many things on your defense. If Latu can reach his potential, and again, this is still a young guy. He just turned 23. Mm-hmm. So a little bit older prospect, and not that old,
Yeah.
And I think he still has more he can do. I think he can still get better. That's the incredible thing.
Right.
Is like Latu's still got things that he needs to work on and getting better in those capacities. Yeah. And what better coach than Charlie Partridge to get the most out of him? And so I really do believe that, this was the best case scenario for Indianapolis. If they were going to address pass rush, get the best pass rusher in the class and allow his production and his smarts up here to translate onto the field, and how much that will help you as you're looking to get more consistent pressure on the quarterback. Get a guy that did it for 2 years at UCLA and was one of, if not the best pass rushers in the entire college football world. I mean, really. So I personally think it was a great pick for Indianapolis. We've already talked about, obviously, the medicals to death at this point, but strictly from a player standpoint and how Chris Ballard approached this, I love it, man.
Yep, I agree with you. The more I talk about it, the more I kind of fall in love with the idea of what Latu can become. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what he's going to be capable of over this offseason. We're going to get a lot of chances at that. But I definitely think that you got Charlie Partridge coming in with all these new schemes and these new ideas. I think that this could be a very fantastic situation for Latu to come in and be able to take advantage of his skill set.
Right. And again, like we've said this before, I'll say it one more time. Like you have some really good defensive linemen.
Yes.
But you don't have that elite guy. Latu has that potential to become that elite guy. Right. He has that potential. I mean, we've even heard guys that have worked with Latu, worked with other defensive linemen that have been, mind you, first-round picks that say Latu is a guy that I believe could come in year one and have double-digit sacks. I mean, that's the potential of this guy. Like, he could be a runner. He could be in the competition for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of player the Colts are getting. And that's not just us talking. That's experts who have studied him over the last couple of years at UCLA that are saying these things. People that have coached him who are saying these things, right? Heck, Max Crosby, one of the best defensive linemen, one of the best edge guys in the NFL, saying these things about him. So definitely encouraging, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, that you maybe have found your guy at edge rush, which is definitely exciting. Been a position, I think, out of any of them that has eluded you the most has been that edge rush. And Derek, just think about this for a second. The last two drafts for the Indianapolis Colts, they have swung for the fences twice when it comes to guys. Anthony Richardson last year, quarterback, that's been a big issue. Edge rush. I love it. Those are two premium positions that you need to figure out. If you're going to compete and seriously compete in the AFC, you got to be able to get pressure on the quarterback consistently.
Absolutely agree with you, Mayor. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. The Colts changing their identity and how they approach the edge department now with this Latu pick. Let us know your thoughts on this. Do you think that Indianapolis is going to start looking at edge a little bit differently now based off of this Latu pick? But we want to know your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.